Good afternoon, everyone. So welcome to this quantitative history lecture. So today we have our visiting professor here at the University of Hong Kong, Professor Duol Kim. His main affiliation is Myongji University in Korea. As many of you know, Professor Kim has done a lot of work, especially on the economic history of Korea and Japan. And he is very well respected in the global economic history community. So I have seen Professor Kim on many occasions, but mainly in economic history conferences in Europe, Asia, and then Hong Kong, and especially on the mainland. So, so his work, as mentioned, is mostly in economic theory, but he also does work beyond mainstream, let's say, mainstream economic history, including law and economics areas. So many of you may know he. In addition to his work on Korean history, he has done a lot of work on Japan, especially Japanese economic history. So the title for his talk is Pre-Modern Growth, Industrialization, and Biological Living Standards of Japan and Korea from the mid-19th century onward until today. Okay, so let's welcome Professor Kim.
Yeah, thank you, Tzu. It is really honor for me to be here, and especially to kindly invite me to University of Hong Kong. So I have stayed here from last March, and I'm pretty happy here. A lot of friends and Beth supported me a lot. Thanks again for everyone. Okay, today my subject I'd like to talk is pre-modern growth, industrialization, and biological living standard of Japan and Korea from mid-19th century to present. Let me start from why I started this subject. It started from a very accident. That is, like many historical events, started from small accidents. It also was truth to me. In 2008, I remember when I finished my PhD in the United States and then taught at UC Davis a little bit and then come back to Korea. I was, as a junior scholar, I tried to look at various sources. One of them is official gazettes of Governor General of Korea. During the colonial period, Governor General published official gazettes from the very beginning of the colonial period. This is a main source for understanding Korean economic history. When I look at this source, I was a little bit diverse. That is, many scholars focus on the main pages of the official gazettes. I looked at advertisement session, and then when I looked through the advertisement session, I found an interesting advertisement. This is a list of people who died on the street. Why Japanese government, colonial government, published it on the official gazettes, and what these informations are, that's very curious to me. So since then, I looked at various sources. I realized that Japanese government made a law in 1899 about the treatment of choreo patients and choreo disease. Choreo means, well, actually you can recognize it means traveling. So Japanese government made a law and created a procedure how to take care of the people who died on the street. Well, I studied this subject for last several years. So since then, whenever I presented my work in Europe and United States, I asked whether this kind of procedure existed in your country, but I have not here. I have not heard any positive answer. This is sort of very unique in the in Japan. So, well, who are choreo disease? Well, the law specifically defines who they are. The same Chinese character is called, pronounced in Korea as Henglia, so I will use both words in my presentation. The choreo disease or Henglia disease consists of two groups of people. One is people who were pretty sick, but who didn't have anybody to take care of them. So if they are very sick and on the street, then they are usually moved to charity hospitals or institute. Then they were taken care of there. But unfortunately, if they died, then they were categorized as a choreo disease. In other words, if they have any family, then they will claim their body and do funerals. However, because they didn't have any families or acquaintance to take care of their corpse, the government did that, usually cremated rather than buried. Another group is simply people who died on the street. Then the police investigated who they are, why the person died. If the person, and then according to Korean data, 70% of them were identified. Then if the person were killed, then police start to investigate. Or if the person died accidentally, and then the police identified who they are, then the body was delivered to the family. However, remaining 30%, police could not know who the person is. Then the government take care of the body. That's another way the choreo disease emerged. So basically, choreo disease are those who died on the street and they don't have any acquaintance to claim the body. So they were taken care of by the government, basically municipalities. So as you can see, this is one person, and you see a lot of people were advertised in this page. If I show in a large picture, you will see that various informations are recorded. This is very formalized form. Every information has the same format. Who the person is. Sometimes the name is identified, but it is very unusual. Sex, address, age, appearance, a lot of informations are recorded. Why? The Japanese government, according to the law said that after taking care of the corpse, the municipalities should advertise the fact I showed like that in official gazettes or any newspapers. So this attracted my attention. That is, I can use this information. When I first discovered this advertisement, I didn't know how comprehensive the data was. So after some survey, I decided to input the data into the computer. Of course, not me, but my RA. And then for 1 year, several RAs spent the time to input the whole data. Well, I started from colonial Korea, but later I realized that some the same data should exist in Japan. I have not checked yet, but Taiwan also should have similar data. That's how I continued my research. So the most important information from this advertisement is for economic historian, the height, right? Height is used as a measure of a biological living standard. For last 4 decades, a lot of economic historians used height information to measure the biological living standard. This is famous Waller curve. It shows that the taller people live longer. And then this is data by George Batten and Bloom. They are leading scholars in anthropometric history. According to them, the positive correlation between height and GDP per capita is very strongly positively correlated. So based on this information, I wanted to study biological living standard in Korea. So after finishing my data input, I found that the data was quite comprehensive. This blue line is the total number of choreo diseased in Korea, published at the Statistical Yearbook of Government General. And then this red line is the data digitized by me. You see that the total number reported to the Government General and the advertisement at the government, the official gazettes are almost similar. It means that most of choreo disease, Henle disease, were reported at the official gazettes. It means that this is a total number, the population of the choreo disease in Korea. So out of that, so this is what I analyzed for last couple of years. So I published 2 papers based on the Korean data, and then recently I'm working on Japanese choreo disease data with Yutaka Arimoto and Hirotaka Matsuda. In my presentation, I will first talk about Japanese biological living standard, and then combine my previous work with the Hijinbark, the Korean biological living standard, and try to suggest some combined view or comprehensive view about the biological living standard of East Asian countries. Well, the first presentation is about Japan. As I mentioned, this is an ongoing project with Yutaka Arimoto and Hirotaka Matsuda. This picture is the basis of economic historian, right? If we summarize what is economic history, then the easiest way might be show this picture. That is, what is the long-term pattern of living standard? What is the long-term pattern of living standard? And then the stylized fact is that humankind lived a very low income level for a long time. And then there was a big change around 1800. This is Industrial Revolution. Since then, great divergence emerged. Income grow, but unevenly, right? So, so what is economic history? Then we usually define economic history as study what is Malthusian trap? What was the living condition during the under the Malthusian trap period, and then why Industrial Revolution changed everything? Since then, why income continued to grow unevenly? These 3 questions are basic questions economic historians try to answer. Well, recently, it is already 20 years ago, Ken Pomeranz suggested a very big question about great divergence. Scholars have tried to understand pre-modern period again. A lot of scholars studied living standard of pre-modern period. However, Ken Pomeranz's work ignited a new attention. Since then, a lot of new estimation about living standard in East Asian countries emerged. Then what is the next step might be to study based on new findings. This is a kind of Bayesian update. That is, what given new information, how to understand the change of living standard. That is what we are interested in. And then we try to understand how living standard changed around around the Industrial Revolution. For this research agenda, me and my co-authors thought that Japan is a good example, good case. The reason is, first, Japan achieved successful industrialization, right? After the port opening, Japanese economy achieved sustained economic growth. So this is a preliminary condition for studying the change of living standard, right? Second, compared to other countries, Japan has a lot of good data, and then very excellent scholars measure the GDP per capita, real wages, and they collected and created great data. So based on these previous studies, we try to understand Japanese history again, and then we try to generalize them to economic history. So in terms of Japanese economic history, key questions related to this period are two. First, what was living standard like before the Industrial Revolution? The Japanese economic historians usually think that the modern industrialization started from the 1870s or 1880s. Then the modern industrialization improved the living standard. And then before the industrialization, what was the living standard like? There was an improvement of a living standard, or it was just a stagnation. These are two main questions. These are two fundamental questions, and then we try to understand. Well, the first question, you may think that this is too obvious, but it is basically not, because many of you already know that there is a big debate in economic history about industrialization puzzle. Since John Comlo's famous paper, many scholars studied the discrepancy between the economic growth and the biological living standard. At the early stage of industrialization, firstly in the United States, many scholars found that biological living standard decreased in spite of economic growth. So recently, Bodenon, and Mraz suggest that this may be a statistical artifact. So there was a big debate about that. Still, it is ongoing issue whether biological living standard improved at the early stage of industrialization. And second is, in case of Japan, as I will explain more in detail, there was economic expansion during the Edo period. Almost 300 years from 1600, the Japanese economy expanded quite a lot. But question is whether this economic expansion was just the expansion of the economy, or it went together with increase of income or biological living standard. On this issue, few scholars recognize it. But during our study, we realized that there is a kind of discrepancy or inconsistency. On one hand, GDP per capita shows that there was an increase of GDP per capita. However, during the 19th century, real wage or mortality stagnant. So whether this discrepancy real, or if it is real, why it happened, that is a big issue. However, no explicit explanation has been provided. So that is what we try to do. by introducing new data, that is choreo disease, height of choreo disease data, we try to answer, we try to shed new light on this issue. Main finding I will describe in detail later, but if I summarize them, sorry. Oh, sorry. It goes like this. That is, excuse me. We found from choreo disease data that biological living standard didn't improve until the modern industrialization. However, when modern industrialization started, biological living standard went up. So this shed new light on the previous studies and provide a foundation to reinterpret existing literature. Another important contribution, I think, is that our data has also both male and female information. Due to the nature of the data, when we measure the height of people in the pre-modern period, most of the data was about men. That is, conscripts, prison, they are all male dominated. So few studies measure the height of female. However, our data provide a very reliable height information, long-term height information here, and this will contribute to understand the female biological living standard. Okay, so let me describe the historical background. Many of you should be familiar, but if I start from the very basic facts for common founding, Japan had a political instability during the warring state period. It was ended by Tokugawa shogunate. From 600 to 1867, this is the year of Meiji Restoration, almost 300 years, Japan enjoyed political stability. This political stability provided a foundation for economic expansion. During this period, basically, Japanese economy doubled. The size of population increased from 17 million to 34 million, and arable land and rice production also doubled. The people living in urban area went up from around 6.4% to 10.3%. This kind of expansion went together with or supported by political institution called alternate attendance system. This is called Sankin Kodai. The Japanese shogunate asked Bakuhu come to many daimyos to come to the capital and stay there for suppressing any potential political resistance. And then this Sankin Kodai provided innovation in terms of transportation network, market integration, and the infrastructure stimulated commerce and then finance. Along with this, new indigenous or traditional industries that is in manufacturing sector also rose. That's a traditional description in Japanese history. However, this expansion of the Tokugawa period changed by the port opening of the 1853. Since then, a lot of new products exported and imported, and then new knowledges and industrialization started. So most important thing of the most important consequence of port opening is the modern industrialization. The Western style, large-scale factory-based production spread from the 1870s. This shows the share of manufacturing sector out of total GDP. You will see that this grew pretty rapidly from around the 1870s or 1880s. So this brought about the growth of the economy. As you can see, the per capita GDP grew a lot since then. And then other indexes show that living standard improved after the industrialization. This shows the real wage series. Although mild, you will see that from 1880, the real wage increased. And then after 1980, there was a very big jump. Compared to male real wage, this is a real wage of a factory worker. Female wage was stagnant. This is also interesting phenomenon I will mention later. Another measure of living standard, height also showed that industrialization improved the living standard. Japan has several important height information. This is student height, male and female. This shows the growth of the height. However, height information can be biased because of the selection issue. Japan has an interesting height information, which is conscript data. After the Meiji Restoration, the government started compulsory military service. So they measure the height of every people aged 20. Okay, so this line, starting from 1876, shows the height of the whole Japanese youngsters, and you find that the height grow from 1880 to 1910. This is the height by the birth year, not the height at the measurement year. Well, anyway, this all supports that modern industrialization improved the living standard in Japan. Then the next question is whether this improvement of living standard was a continuation from the pre-modern period, or it was the change after the modern industrialization. Of course, the living standard, improvement of living standard after the port opening cannot be compared with the pre-modern industrialization. Pre-modern growth should be much milder. However, still, question is whether there was mild economic growth before the industrialization or not. That is what Ken Pomerantz and other scholars have studied a lot, because this can be a foundation of the success or failure of industrialization after the modern period. On this issue, as I hinted at the very beginning, we found that some discrepancy. On one hand, GDP measure suggests that there was a growth of GDP. This is a GDP. So compared to GDP growth after the industrialization, this is so rapid. You may see this is pretty flat. However, from 1804 to 1874, there was a mild economic growth. Per capita GDP increased. However, the measure of real income, real wage, this is a combination of various real wage series. You cannot find a distinctive pattern that there is any sign of increase of real wage. This started only after 1870 or 1880. This growth series is the series that I showed before. Another measure of real wage is this. The previous real wage is real wage of manufacturing sector or urban area. However, this real wage series comes from the rural farm workers measured by Yuchul Gumong. His measure shows that from 1800 to 1900, real wage was stagnant as well in rural regions. So our question is this. We'd like to confirm the improvement of real biological living standard after the industrialization, and then see whether biological living standard was stagnated or improved during the pre-modern period. For studying this, we used the choreo disease data. This, well, as I already mentioned, described, I will not repeat it again. the total number of observation is about 40,000. This is the number of observation per publication year. And then if I convert them according to the year of birth, the data distribution looks like this. It means that the data covers quite comprehensively from around 1840 to 1880 or 1890. One problem of this data is that in case of Japan, municipalities did not advertise the whole choreo disease at the official gazettes. Many municipalities simply report them in local newspapers. So it is not a comprehensive population. This is kind of sample. However, the distribution of the sample in geography and time changes a lot. So we cannot find any trend along this distribution. We are still working on it, but this is one problem we should keep in mind in understanding the result. Well, anyway, using this information, we measure the average height of choreo disease at birth year. So the data we have is this: the height of choreo disease I in region J in year D. Then we convert them into the height of choreo disease at their birth year. For doing this, we put birth year dummies and then run regression after controlling several factors. So running this regression, the total number of observation looks like this. This is male, the data for male. The whole observation is about 36,000, and in case of female, it is 6,000. This is a regression result. Based on this, it is easier to understand the result from this picture. This shows the height of choreo disease from 1840 to 1880. It is almost 150-year period. Well, in anthropometric history, this kind of data is very rare. There is consistent data. Data consistent for more than a century is very rare. In terms of, in that perspective, this data is very unique and very strong. The year here is year of birth. So this point shows that choreo diseased who were born in 1840s, their height is about 158 centimeters. Okay, so then you will see that male choreo diseased, their height changes in 3 phases for 150-year period. Oh, one thing I'd like to mention is that the height is measured at age 30. We normalize them at age 30. So you will see that the height was quite stagnant from 1840 to 1880 or 1890. In your eye, you may not distinguish easily, but if you look at the estimation result, you will see that statistically significant growth started from 1890 or 1900. So it means that the first phase of the height is from 1840 to 1890 or 1900. During this first period, there was no growth of height. However, since then, Japanese height measured by choreo disease grew pretty rapidly until 1970 cohorts, and then again stagnate. That is the basic pattern. How reliable this pattern? In order to check the reliability, we compared with other height data. First is this one. They are height of students, and then height of adults measured by the Japanese government, the health insurance reasons. So they are pretty comprehensive. And then unlike the 19th century, 17-year Japanese people most of Japanese people went to the school, right? Yes.
So how do you normalize age?
Oh, age. In the regression, I included age variable here. Yes. Of course, this is a tricky part. You already dead. How would you know the age, right? So there are, well, this is a very headache issues when I published my paper about Korean henna disease. So if time permits, I will explain more about that, but we took care of it reasonably successfully. So let me get back to the issue later. So this is, as you can see, this curvature is very interesting, right? The change of height from around 1870 or 1880 cohorts, they went together, the whole Japanese people and then the choreo disease. So I think this co-movement strengthens the data pattern of the choreo disease. And then, as you can see, there was the conscript data and student data shows some difference. However, this can be explained later. So the main result from this measurement, male choreo disease height, is that biological living standard didn't improve for a long time. And then it started to grow only after 1890 or 1900. One caveat is that the year is the year of birth, and then height of people is influenced by various factors. The height of people hit the peak at the year of 25 to 30. So from the birth to age 25, there are several stages people in growth. So we cannot pinpoint from when Japanese height grow and then stagnate. However, this pattern supports that we can reject the null hypothesis. That is, the biological living standard improved after the modern industrialization. This can be supported by this height pattern, right? That is first thing I'd like to emphasize. Second is, before the modern industrialization, height was quite stagnant. We cannot observe any improvement of living standard before the modern industrialization. So this is an interesting and important findings from our estimation. So the result can be, there are several implications I can mention, but 2 or 3 if I refer. One is what is the impact of port opening? You will see that port opening didn't have, well, port opening has fundamental influence on Japan's economy. However, we should distinguish the immediate impact and long-run impact. Long-run impact means that because of the port opening, Japan could achieve modern industrialization. However, when Japan opened its port, the increase of import and export, the benefit of trade could affect the living standard. On this issue, Bonhoeffer and Brown already measured the impact and suggest that the short-run impact of port opening is quite small, about 9% of GDP around this time. Our measure of biological living standards support this view. That is, the short-term impact might be quite small. And then another issue is that biological living standard, this pattern suggests that growth of traditional industry or indigenous industry before 1880s might not be significant. They were not so strong enough to increase the living standard in the pre-modern period. This is a big issue in Japanese economic history, but many of you may not recognize it, so I do not explain too much. However, this debate has also important implications. That is, in economic history, proto-industrialization is always a big issue. However, no studies have focused on the impact of proto-industrialization on the growth of living standard or others. So this traditional industry is a Japanese version of proto-industry. And then from that point of view, we may suggest a somewhat negative view on the impact of proto-industrialization. Do you have a question?
Yeah,
Yes.
so it really seems to have a high increase starting after 8090s. And that really is the time point for the Sino-Japanese War, where Japanese win the war and get enormous economies. And which we also supported the industrialization for Japan. Do you think that may be a kind of explanation?
You mean
The Sino-Japanese War and then huge, the China lost the warfare, and so that they need to pay a huge amount of money to governments.
Well, let me think about the impact of the war benefit.
That should be how much about so that's 200 million L's of silver. A lot of money.
That's true. Yes. Okay, so because the work is still ongoing, I cannot neatly explain what the result means. However, basically, our results suggest that Japanese living standard changed after the modern industrialization, and it was quite stagnant before the introduction of modern industries. So the next issue I'd like to discuss is Korean case. This is already published one, but after I briefly explain it, I will try to combine Japanese case and Korean case. Well, in my analysis on Korea, my course and I focused on the port opening. In case of Korea, many of you may know, Korea sustained autarkic policy for a long time. During the Joseon dynasty from 1392 to 1876, Korea didn't participate in any trade activities actively, except for China or Japan. However, this autarky was finished by Japan. After they were forced to open their port, they repeated the same thing to Korea, and then Korea opened its port in 1876. Since then, Korea made a lot of treaties with Japan, China, United States, and other countries. Since then, the trade increased quite rapidly throughout from around 1876 to 1940s. Annual growth rate of export and import is about 20%. It is a very rapid expansion. What was the impact of this port opening? Japan, Korea, and China experienced the same thing, but different consequences. In case of Korea, many traditional scholars thought that port opening is a sin. That is, because of port opening, Korean people were exploited, and this caused the economic decline. And then this also weakened the Korean government. This resulted in colonization. So this traditional view is quite prevalent in Korea. However, whether this was supported by empirical evidence or not, especially one implication from this traditional view is that Korean biological living standards should decline during the port-opening period. So what we try to do is to test this traditional view, whether biological living standard really stagnated. Of course, if we had GDP per capita or other measures, we may not need to do it. However, unfortunately, until now, we don't have a good measure of GDP per capita during the port-opening period. Our GDP per capita series started from 1910, when the colonial period began. So my course and I tried to measure the biological living standard for port-opening period. This can be interpreted as a way to getting a substitute. In other words, when I use the height information for Korea and Japan, the same data, but I used differently. In case of Japan, because Japan already had other measures, so I can compare the existing measures with choreo disease data and try to go deeper. However, in case of Korea, we don't have other information. So I try to use the Hengna disease data as a substitute for the GDP per capita or other measures of economic growth. So this is the data I already showed. Different from Japan, the data I have about Korean Hengna disease, this is the total population of Hengna disease. We don't need to worry about the selection issue here. So the total number of the observation, this is male choreo disease, ages from 25 to 69, because we need to eliminate people who are on growth or after 69. The age information is really suspicious. So that's why we limit the observation from 25 to 69. The total number is 52,000 using this information. Measure the height the same way. The result can be shown in picture like this. So this picture shows the height of Korean Hengna disease from 1850s to 1910, 60-year period. This is the year of birth year. So how to interpret this height? Okay, so people who were born in 1850s, and then their height, these people who were born in the 1850s, their height was completed before 1880, right? Since the port opening started in 1876, it means that these people were already grown before the port opening. Their height was determined before the port opening. Compared to these people who were born in the 1880s, they were born after the port opening, so their height was completed during the port opening period. So if I compare the height of these cohorts and these cohorts, then I can see what is the impact of overall impact of port opening. As you can find, compared to 1850 cohorts, 1880 cohorts were 1.1 centimeter taller. It means that port opening improved the biological living standard. So this suggests that traditional view may overestimate the negative impact of port opening. As economists believe, the benefit of trade was stronger than other negative impact. That's what this results suggest. However, this measure also has interesting implications for the colonial period as well. In my paper, in 2011 paper, I measured the height from 1880 cohorts to 1910 cohorts. This shows that the height grew during the colonial period. For the same way, people who were born in the 1880s, their height was completed before the colonial period. However, people who were born in the 1910s, their height was completed during the colonial period. If you compare their heights you will see that the height grow by 1.5 centimeters. It is a joke. I published this paper in English, not in Korea, because if I published in Korean, many people dislike me, right? So, of course, even before I report this result, there was a study measuring the GDP per capita during the colonial period. This shows that GDP per capita grow on average 2.2% per year. So those colors were really hated by many people. Okay, but so this is pretty consistent with the GDP estimation. However, as everyone here knows, correlation and causation should be distinguished, right? Well, there was a growth of height and growth of GDP during the colonial period, but it does not mean that colonial government made it, right? So the reason why these results were criticized is because many people think that we suggest that Japanese government did a good thing, right? However, of course, I'm not saying that Japanese government didn't do anything or did only bad thing. However, in order to understand the growth of biological living standard during the colonial period, this trend suggests interesting implication. As you can see, the growth of biological living standard during the colonial period was a continuation from the port opening period. If you compare the difference of height, it is only 0.4 centimeters. This is a very, very strong argument. However, the total amount that can be attributed to Japanese colonial government might be only 0.4%. The growth of the GDP or height growth during the colonial period mostly can be understood as a continuation of the port opening and expansion of the foreign trade. So this extension of the height series can shed new light in understanding the colonial period. Of course, this is an ongoing project, how much we can distinguish the role of Japanese government and other factors. That is the future work. Well, I'm almost finished. Yes.
I have a question for this slide. So the data has to be collected after I think the Korean government initially they didn't collect the disease data, did they?
Oh, well, Koreans were very eager to cut from the colonial experience. One of them is that official gazettes stopped publishing information about choreo disease after the liberation.
No, I mean, so the disease data in Korea, when did they start collecting it? 1910?
Colonial Korea, yeah, 1910 to 1945, yes.
Okay, so then those who were born in like 1850, they had to die after 1910 to be reported.
They are people, mostly these people who were born in 1850s, they were died during the 1910s in age 60.
Right, but those who were, I guess you also control it for regression.
Yes, okay. Yeah, this is a result of regression. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, but still, do you think that there might be a possibility that there's some selection issue for those who could have lived to 1910?
Please read my paper.
Okay.
Yes. Let me answer to you more in detail. Time permits, but basically, this is the result. Let me first finish my presentation. Okay. I don't have much thing to say at this moment. Only thing I can show you is comparison between Japan and Korea. If we look at the centennial pattern of height between Japan and Korea, you will see pretty similar. You will see some similarity and difference, both male and female. Interesting thing I just want to mention is this part. Both Korean and Japanese height start to stagnate recently. Okay, youngsters don't grow. Although Netherlands, Dutch, their average height is more than 180. But Korean and Japan, their height is stagnated around only 170 centimeters. Okay, so why did it happen? That is an interesting issue. Many Koreans, whenever I show this picture to Korean scholars and people, everybody blame about entrance exam system. I'm not sure whether it is really true or not, but this similarity between Japan and Korea made me believe it is true. If I have a good information about Korean American, for example, this can let me have a chance to test whether entrance exam is really the criminal or not. However, there are other interesting patterns you can see from this similarity and difference between the two countries. And then if I can add up here Taiwan, or if I can add up China as well, then we can shed new light on Eastern economic growth for last 150 years. So this is all I can say today. And thank you very much for your attention. Thank you very much.
Very, very interesting. Yeah, thank you very much for sharing your work over many years. It's great to know, we can actually rely on height information to understand or measure how much economic progress a society has been able to achieve. But I think the last point about the comparison between Japan and Korea, and then possibly with China to be added, I am based on my casual observations. For China, it's still kind of an ongoing story because after the reforms started, Chinese average height has been going higher and higher, maybe partly because of all the genetically modified food that young Chinese have been able to enjoy. So as a result, those growth hormones that were part of the genetically modified food have been able to carry on to have their effect after the young children eat them. So we can see like a few of you in the audience are much taller than me, especially Roran. Yeah, maybe we can study a little bit further to understand the reasons behind this. But yeah, so it's great that your work shows us that we can actually dig deeper and do more into Chinese historical archives. So maybe we can learn more about the three societies, Korea, Japan, and China. Okay, so we have about half an hour for Q&A. So who would like to go first? Yeah, John. Yeah, those of you who are in the audience online, if you have any questions or comments, you can post them in the Q&A box. So I will read them out on your behalf. Okay.
Well, thanks very much for a fascinating talk. I wish I had some of that growth hormone and genetically modified food. I would be 6 foot tall now. Unfortunately, that's not quite the case. But jokes aside, I am glad to hear to learn from your analysis. It really puts us in dialogue with economic historians outside of Asia. Things can be comparative, and we can really try to understand from each other's work. A couple of questions, one on the collection of data and the purpose thereof, and two, this whole issue of height as a proxy. The first one on the collection of height information of corneal disease. The way it's framed in the advertisement or the gazette was that it was for appearance. So I wonder if that's for identification purposes, for the unclaimed bodies. And if that's the case, what would be interesting is not the mean itself, but the standard deviation, which you showed on one of the slides. If everyone is the same height, you don't need to advertise it, right, for identification purposes. So I thought it was quite interesting that you have such rich data over such a long period of time with the distribution that change over time, I would think. So I wonder if you would have more to say about that and whether we learned something about that as well. The other thing is on height as a proxy, especially in the case of Japan, which is an early modernizer. Is height a proxy for economic growth for us now as an analytical framework, or was height a proxy for the modernizers? So the reason we have such a rich set of data was that as early modernizers, the Japanese government was consumed by this issue of height growth increase over time. And that must have engendered a certain mindset in the people and also the way they ruled that focused on that as an issue, especially among students and conscripts, right? So instead of just thinking of it purely as a reflection of economic growth, it was also the focus on that in the case of Japan and the rest of the Asian economies to make that an indicator. So when you use that as an indicator, that would result in certain trend over time as well, not just as a pure reflection of your economic situation, your living standards, but also as a way that people would change their behavior. Maybe they wouldn't even take the entrance exam just to gain a few more interest in height and career down the road. So I wonder if there is something there that we should think about, especially as we look at Asian economies, because this whole consumption of modernization was not totally synchronized in China, Korea, and Japan. So that might have resulted in some of the patterns you see as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Both of them are very important, not only for understanding our data and then for future research. First one is that, yes, many economic historians try to analyze both mean and standard errors. The variations of height. I have not focused too much on measuring the change of variations over time, but let me think more about that. However, the one big issue is how much investigators, policemen, were attentive in measuring the height correctly, right? And then there is another issue like the height was measured by, traditional Japanese measures, chok and chon. The chok means, I don't know how to pronounce in Japan, Chinese, but 3.3 centimeter, the traditional measures, right? So it might make some distortion. That is one problem. However, after checking everything, it doesn't seem to be a big problem. We realized that is, I can see a reasonable variation of heights. And then even in the United States, when they measure the height, they use inch. Inch is 2.4 centimeters, which is reasonably large. So considering that, yes, my answer would be that, yes, I will look at more about the variation. That is one thing I can say. Second one is, if I understand correctly, then, yes, I use the height. However, the government may be also interested in height. Then they make some efforts to increase the height. That is an interesting issue. I hope that first you understand our work as a starting point of whole discussion, right? In order to do that kind of consideration, we first need to know the height itself, right? But your point is quite important because Japanese, well, this, I'm not sure how many internet people like me or not, but okay. There was some reason to work in Korea. They try to look at the, they was sociologists who don't measure height like me, but they try to look at social meaning of height measures in Korea during the colonial period. And what we found is that, I don't need to show the graph here, but Japanese are continuously shorter than Koreans, okay? Even during the colonial period. So when they investigated Korean heights and Japanese heights, they were so annoyed why we were so taller than Korean people. So this kind of social controversies or recognition is an also interesting issue. So let me think more about that in the future work. Thank you very much.
But that's a very dangerous thing to say. Huh? You still said it. So I guess maybe I can comment on John's point. I don't think the Japanese officials were measuring the height just to show how good they have done. I mean, how well their work had been in governing Korea at that time. But my guess for the Kori diseased people, they may have tried to provide more information for the relatives and friends to identify the bodies, right? So that may be why. So this kind of advertisements may actually be a good source to get height information, because otherwise, you know, how could the relatives, without seeing the body and the face, be able to tell how he is my relative and so on. But I have a related question about the possible biases in the sample. That is, actually, if I would put myself in the shoes of the Japanese officials assigned to Korea at that time, I would like to show more better sort of indicators by exaggerating the height information, maybe also selectively only publicizing those bodies on the street that looked taller. So you know, in the end, you know, the impression one would get by looking at the time series of the height information for the deceased found on the streets in Seoul, let's say, that would make the colonial government look better. So they would just omit those who looked short, you know, those bodies that looked short and then not publicized. Could there be such a bias? I mean, I know, like in China, right? Whatever statistics the government officials realize are important for measuring progress made by the party and so on. Then they try to find ways to exaggerate such indicators.
I see.
I mean, it's a very common practice.
Okay.
Like unemployment. For China, unemployment rate, it's always around 4 or 5%. It never changes anyway. So,
oh yes, that is one thing I will consider about that. But the height of cholera disease, who died on the homeless people, nobody care about their height, right? So exaggerating their height. I'm not sure how much incentives policemen or other investigators have to exaggerate their height. So from that point of view, I'm not sure whether I should worry about that issue seriously. However, more positive answer to your points might be that, okay, I don't have the picture here. Then what we are considering is not the level, but the change of the height, the trend. So I was very happy when I looked at the first results of Japanese height pattern, because when I first get the Korean height, it was monotonously grows. So, well, when I sent this result to journal, then they should say a lot of critique, this kind of bias, other kind of bias issue. Fortunately, I was successful. But in case of Japan case, if you remember, it is non-linear, right? This kind of pattern is really free from various kind of bias issue. So important is in our analysis, the important is the trend rather than the level. And then that is another reason why I compared the level with other more reliable height information. In case of colonial Korea, average height of choreo disease is 3 centimeters shorter than soldiers. So this is reasonable difference, right? We cannot say that height of choreo disease were exaggerated. So that is why I compared with other data sources as well. Yeah. Yes, Sang.
So I guess earlier you mentioned about this debate in the history literature where, if I remember correctly, like when the modernization starts or industrialization starts, whether really height increases or it's going to like decrease. So is your result on Japan suggesting that when the industrialization starts, you're going to see an increase in height right away? Is that what you're suggesting, or do you have a different story to that?
Basically, for the industrialization period, post 1880 period, we just confirm existing information because, as you already saw here, there are plenty of information suggesting that living standard of Japan improved after the port opening, after the spread of modern industrialization. That is, for example, in case of conscripts, their height started to grow only already from the cohorts of 1880s, right?
Right, but I think the debate so if I remember some of the papers you cited, I think their argument was that increase in height depends on the area, whether it's an industrial city, urban area, or a rural area. And if I remember again, the decline in height, I think, was mainly found in the urban area, not the rural. So can you also divide into urban and rural and see how the height trend is different across the two?
I haven't checked it yet, but basically that is not so different, I feel. Okay. Well, this is another, well, I'm sorry, I might make too much joke, but think of the nature of choreo disease. They are basically moving people, right? So we don't know where they died, where they were born, right? So even if a person was born in urban area, we don't know whether they were born in Seoul or in a rural area. So it is hard to connect this height information with the geographical characteristics. So we only control where they died. However, I am very reluctant to suggest or interpret the geographical pattern of height. However, one thing I can say at this moment is, in case of choreo disease, height was not so different between rural and urban area. So that's, and then in case of conscripts, there were height differences. However, for almost 50 prefectures in Japan, movement is surprisingly the same. This is the average of the whole country, but if they also have information by prefectures. All of them shows the same pattern. They all grow. with almost the same speed. So from that point of view, in Japan, surprisingly, we cannot see any industrialization puzzle that was observed in the United States or other countries, in terms of height, at least.
I see. That's interesting. Okay.
Any other comments, questions? Yeah.
Yes, Professor. Firstly, thank you for the inspiring presentation. And my question is that I think in previous figure that we can see the gap between the height of the choreo disease and the height of the students or adults with records. And I think back to the around the 20th century that the gap is sort of like relatively small. However, if we look at the trend that began at the mid 20th century, the gap became sort of like obvious. I wonder whether we could attribute, we could attribute this increasing gap between these two to say the increasing social inequality of income or status in the Korean society?
Well, first thing I can say is that I should see more carefully because the paper is ongoing. So I should try to look at what the data exactly mean. That's what we are doing. That is what you very different from what you are doing. In your work, you try to collect new data and run regressions. However, this is kind of looking at the same picture again and again and see whether this means this or others. Yes, there are several interesting or abnormal or normal patterns I look at every day. For example, some of you may recognize it or not. This is the conscription data, age 20. Their height is shorter than the choreo disease, for example. What does it mean? That's however, this after 1 month, I resolved this puzzle because they are 20 years old people. This is the height of 25 to 30-year-old people, normalized to that age. But if I measure the height of choreo disease at age 20, their height is located around here. So this is not a defect of the data or strength of the data. Similarly, each series has their own problems. So if I consider them, most of them can be explained, I hope. But at this moment, yes, some of them I cannot answer right away. However, let me check. But in case of this height, this is the choreo disease, and this line is, what is it? Students' height. And high school students, they're even until 1910 to 1920, they are age 25, but their height is on age 17. The height can be shorter. This kind of issues we should consider. However, at this moment, I can say good answers at this moment. Sorry.
Yes, a lot of confirming facts. Thank you.
Yes.
So on this point, I wonder whether better nutrition would make a bigger marginal impact on growth after age 20 or after age 17 or before, which impact would be bigger. I don't know. Huh?
Yes, that is one of my courses always discussed. Hirotaka-san, his major interest is on this nutritional issues, and he's very knowledgeable about that. Basically, as you all know, human height changes. It does not grow smoothly, right? In your early age, you grow pretty fast, and then slow, and then during the in teenagers, they always grow. So in advanced countries, average height reaches the top around the age 17 or 18. Since then, it doesn't grow. However, in poor countries, height still grow quite a lot after age 20. So this kind of variations, I should reflect them. And then one of another specialist in this region, Stefan Morgan, he also emphasized the shrinkage of height. After age 40, people's height shrink because backbone, because of, this kind of measurement issue should be considered also too.
Yeah, that may be one of the reasons behind the widening gap.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Any other?
Yes.
Kai-Xiang, yeah.
Very important research. We are interested in gathering the height of body in homicide in China's criminal reports, and we hope we can compare the data together in the future.
Oh, great, thank you.
One question of mine is that from the wage data of Japan, we can see that wage of male increased greatly relative to the female, which is an important support of dualism in theory. But why we can find the similar trend in height? Because we can see that females' height and the males' height increase similarly.
Oh, thank you very much. I forgot to mention about that point, but thank you very much for reminding me. Because this table is so large, I can show you clearly. This regression results from 1 to 4, these are height for male, and 5 to 8 is a regression for female. This picture was based on this regression. Interesting is the change of height for male started from 1890s, but in case of female, it was 20 years after. There was a time lag between the growth of height between male and female. It means that this is quite consistent with the height pattern, the real wage series. You see that one may be better. This picture. This is the wage of factory workers. In case of male, from 1880 to 1920, there was a growth. However, compared to growth of male wage growth during this period, female, growth was quite low. Right? So this may explain why the female height growth was delayed compared to male. That's an important issue I'd like to highlight in the paper, and thank you for reminding me. Yeah. Yes. Yes, that's interesting issue. Why this kind of discrepancy happened? One traditional answer might be that female were discriminated. That is the easy answer to them. And that's why many Japanese historians examine the nutritional factors. They try to measure how much nutrition Japanese people took during this period and so on. But even before the taking of nutrition, the wage pattern shows that they were already discriminated in the market, right? So I'm not sure. I don't know. I don't have a good answer at this moment. However, I didn't. One thing I want to mention is that even if I didn't show today's presentation, in case of mortality pattern, Japanese mortality start to drop only after 1920s. So although income grow from 1880s and then height also grow from around here, mortality was quite high for a long time, and then it started to decline from 1920s. So why was there so big gap? That is another puzzle we discussed a lot when we prepared this paper. Recently, I realized that this can be explained by this low wage, because low wage and some household discrimination, the resource distribution within household can be severely discriminated against women, then mother might not provide enough nutrition to their children. That is a pretty standard explanation in economics literature, right? This might happen in Japan in the early 20th century.
Yeah, so sorry, my throat. I have one question from our colleague, Professor Yuan Weipeng in Shanghai. So are the measurement systems consistent across time as used by government officials? As we know, like 1 inch in the Tang Dynasty China was very different from 1 inch used in the Qing Dynasty. So he wonders whether there was some similar change in Korea or Japan during the sample period you are studying. Yeah.
I see. Oh, yes, that is also an important point. As Kai-Shing mentioned, you are studying the homicide, the autopsy records, right, in China. The same records exist in Korea. However, problem is, in case of Korea, the measure changes, always changes. So we cannot see the change of height using those information. But during the colonial period, I can say confidently that there is no such problem. The measure was quite standardized and there was no change of measure itself. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So time is up. So thank you very much, though. So this is a very good illustration of not only of your work, but also for all of us who are interested in studying Chinese history and other histories. Yeah. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Also, thanks to everyone online as well as in this wonderful lecture hall on the Hong Kong U campus. So see you next time. Okay. Thank you.